Hey guys, so today we're going to do a reaction video to Andrew Henderson, Nomad Capitalist. And he's going to discuss today 8 best countries to move to from the US. Let's go.
If you're an American who is looking to move overseas to reduce your taxes, increase your freedom, and better your lifestyle, I'm going to share with you 8 countries that our clients have enjoyed as their first place moving outside of the United States, tell you how you can move there, and tell you what you need to think about. First thing you want to look at when you're moving out of the United States, or really any particularly Western country, is what we do here at Nomad Capitalist, and that's creating a holistic plan. And so I see people who want to move to Mexico. They see it in the LA Times. They see it in the New York Post. Everybody's moving to Mexico. Mexican residence is bureaucratic, but it's relatively affordable and straightforward to get. And so, hey, why not move to Mexico? And what we saw at Nomad Capitalist Live, our live event we did in Mexico City this year, was that there are people who are living in Mexico as Americans, Canadians, etc., who aren't aware of how the tax issues actually work, and they're not following the proper advice because they're listening to other expats who aren't worried about getting sucked into tax nets, who don't have businesses. You want to make sure that you've got a holistic plan no matter where you move. I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist, and we created the idea of creating and executing holistic offshore plans for high net worth individuals, over 1,000 helped so far, who want to reduce their taxes, increase their freedom with things like second residences and passports, and grow their opportunities overseas. And so let me share with you 8 different countries where we've had folks move and they like it. The reality is there's no perfect place to go. When I first left the United States, I bounced all around being nomadic, and ultimately I wanted to be further away from home. And so I spent time in some very far-flung places. I enjoyed that. Over 10, 12 years later, I don't enjoy that quite as much. I'm looking to go a little bit back to some of the places that are more like the US. But let's just start with a list. Number 1 is Mexico. Americans have really enjoyed moving to Mexico. It's one of the places where a lot of folks have gone. And here's what's interesting. The tide has turned. Back in 2015, when Trump was running for president and people said they would move to Canada if he was elected, I said you should move to Mexico. People laughed. And yet now, even among high net worth individuals, you've got lots of folks moving down to Puerto Vallarta, moving to Los Cabos, moving to Ajijic, moving to Tulum, moving to Playa del Carmen. They're all over the place. And again, we've seen, partially due to the increased freedom of movement in the last couple of years, that even people with $5 or $10 million in the bank are moving to Mexico. Now, they're not moving their money to.
So, I've heard that a lot of the gringos that are moving to Mexico are basically increasing the cost of living in Mexico in certain areas. Not all of Mexico, but in certain areas, it's becoming more expensive. The cost of living is rising, food, because of all the gringos that are moving into Mexico. It's making these living situations more difficult for the resident natives that live there. Is that good or bad? Let me know your comments, guys.
Mexico. That's not what I've generally advised, but they are getting Mexican residents and they're going down and living in Mexico. You don't want to do the tourist visa run deal anymore. It's not going to work. You want to get a residence permit. You can prove that you have income and they'll give you a residence permit. We help people get Mexican residence all the time, but it's a soft landing country. There's some of the creature comforts of the US. You do have some of the actual online shopping kind of stuff. You have NFL games on TV, you have a lot of the American restaurants, and people say that sounds silly, but we've mentioned before, what's the one thing people miss sometimes when they leave the US? They miss In-N-Out Burger, for example. You're not going to get that anywhere else, but you can go to Five Guys, you can go to Smash Burger, you can go to other places that are out there. And so to have in Mexico City the California Pizza Kitchen, if that's your place, then that's not a bad thing. People laugh about that, and then they move, and then a year later they're like, I got a hankering for that pizza kitchen. And so the fact that Mexico is close, same time zone, a lot of entrepreneurs have been telling us that in the last couple of years. They need the time zone. They want to be close enough to family. Heck, if you have family in California and you live in Seattle, you're closer in Mexico. And so that's a very soft landing. You're going to see a lot of the same foods. Culturally speaking, very similar. The language is different. There are places you can get around by speaking English, but it's not that hard of a language to learn. And I found that in Mexico, my Spanish is understood better than parts of South America. So Mexico's number 1. Costa Rica has also been high on the list. They've been a very tax-friendly country where it's more clear-cut in terms of the tax benefits. Mexico is one of the most opaque countries for taxes, quite frankly. And so we're constantly working with folks on how to limit their Mexican exposure. Costa Rica, at least for now, they may not be forever, is tax friendly. So it's more adventurous. This is for folks who want to recharge. We've had folks who run yoga studios, folks who run kind of wellness businesses online. They want a more spiritual expat community. They want a more tight-knit community. You're not going to live in the capital of Costa Rica, so you're going to be driving. So if you're someone like I am who wants to get to the airport quickly and get around, Costa Rica is not only not a big hub, but wherever you're going to be living may be quite some distance from either the main airport or a secondary airport. But clear taxes, again, same time zone, easy enough to get back if you're going to the U.S. Central America is better for, I would say, North Americans because a lot of the flights go there, and also down to South America. But if you're in Europe, it may be easier to go to a place like Mexico, obviously a much bigger country. So you've got to decide in those two cases, do I want more of a, eco, kind of spiritual, more, close-knit community in some of the beaches or some of the jungles of Costa Rica? Do I like that vibe? Or do I want Mexico, which has, dozens of places to choose from? One of the places that's worked, I certainly cannot say it's my favorite. It's a pretty place, Uruguay. Not a lot going on down there. However, if you're looking, we have had Americans who are saying, I want to be as far away from the chaos that's happening in this part of the world as possible. Mexico ain't it, right? Uruguay is one of the most stable countries in South America. It's a small country. It's got a lot going for it. You can work towards a great passport that's widely respected by all if you were actually to live there for as little as 3 years. And so it has a bit more of a European vibe for people who want that. You'll constantly find folks who say, I'm German, I'm Italian. Basically, their great-great-grandparents were from there. And so it's very calm and very far away from it all. They have a very clear tax incentive. So if you're an American, my advice generally is, even if you don't mind paying some taxes, if you don't mind paying the United States, then go to a place where you can pay zero, and you're going to end up perhaps paying something to the U.S., depending on what your income is. If you're an entrepreneur, it's going to be easier to solve. If you're an investor, it may or may not be easy to solve. But the fact that Uruguay will just leave you alone on the tax front for a number of years is a benefit to where it just makes your life a little bit more simple. Same in Belize. Again, this is more geared towards retirees, so I've never had anybody who's 35 go to Belize. But if you're in your 50s and 60s, I do.
Hey guys, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave me a comment. That's all I ask. So, I'm curious. What do you guys think? If you moved to Uruguay or Belize, would it be worth it in terms of the cost of living to pay taxes in a different tax bracket in a whole nother country than to pay taxes in the US? Would it be worth it to move to a whole new location and pay taxes there so that you can save more money? Or would you rather not pay taxes at all?
I do think it's overhyped. I do think that people see about, they read about it in newsletters, and they like the fact that it speaks English. There's other places in that part of the world that speak English. You could get citizenship by investment in the Caribbean, go and live in one of those countries. They have a number of the same benefits, just not quite as close to the U.S., but still pretty close. You could go and live in, Corn Island, Nicaragua. You could live in Roatan in Honduras. Those are not as developed, but they are also English speaking. So I never entirely saw the appeal of Belize, but if you're a little bit older and you're not as concerned about getting citizenship or a good citizenship, then Belize can work. And we've had some folks who've moved down there who were older and who were happy. So in that part of the world, Mexico, Costa Rica, Uruguay, and Belize, haven't had that many folks moving to Panama, especially from the U.S. recently. We've had some Europeans moving to Panama. I think the fact that Panama really doesn't naturalize people to get citizenship. If you actually live in Mexico, Costa Rica, Uruguay, you can get citizenship. I'm not convinced, especially like in Uruguay, you're going to get it by not living there. But if you actually want to go and live somewhere, you've got to look at the tax consequences. 2 of those 3 countries are very tax favorable. So you can get, with really no additional tax, while reducing your U.S. tax, if not in some cases even eliminating it, you can work towards a pretty nice neutral second passport in a country that's totally different, much smaller, much more peaceful than what you're used to. Panama doesn't really offer that, and so we've seen a smaller number of folks going to Panama, especially as they've raised some of the prices on the visa programs. In Europe, obviously, Portugal's been all over the headlines. Lots of Americans are going there. Because of the tax treaty with the U.S., it works for certain people. So if you're earning royalty income, if you're a dividend investor, if you have certain types of income, there can be a benefit on the U.S. side, not always on the Portuguese side, but they've had a crypto tax exemption, which now they'd like to get rid of. We talked about that. You can work towards citizenship European citizenship, which if you were to ever not want to be an American, you would have Portuguese citizenship to basically take over and fill the gap that U.S. passport filled. Plus, you'll be able to travel within as a resident and then eventually move within as a future citizen anywhere in the European Union and actually the European Economic Area. So you've got a lot of benefits you can work towards there. And so if you're an American who thinks, I may not always want to be American, hey, you might say Europe is not that much better. It's not the exact opposite of the U.S., but at least I have access to a lot of different countries. In the same way that an American has access to a lot of different states, the EU, it's at the country level. And so there can be a benefit of that. Plus, European citizens, at least not yet, aren't taxed on their worldwide income. And so I think a lot of Americans have found Portugal, especially if you're from California. Oh my goodness, there's places with California weather, guys. You can
Think about that, guys. Americans are being taxed on their income worldwide. Worldwide. That's the most insane. Well, I guess it's quite genius if you want to be a slave owner. Ouch! Now, I'm being a little bit dramatic. I'm over exaggerating. However, where can an American go tax free? Maybe we'll do another video on it. Subscribe to the channel. Please, subscribe. What are you doing? Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment. It's not that hard. It's quite simple.
Find that, and it is somewhat in Portugal. You've got surfing. You get a lot of cool stuff there. Ireland, we've had a few folks, different crowd. And a lot of folks say, no, especially the Canadians, no, I don't want to go to Ireland. Ireland has tax incentives for foreigners. English is perfect, probably the best on this list. You can actually speak English the way people speak English where you're from, in the United States or Canada. You can actually talk, you can actually joke, you can actually have irony, you can actually do all the things that just people who speak English as a second language or who speak a different version of English than you do, you aren't able to do. And so you'll actually have more flexibility in some cases on where your companies are structured, for example, if you move to Ireland. Than if you move to Portugal, where they have this big blacklist and they're kind of particular about how you structure your company. So as an American, setting up for simplicity offshore, in let's say the UAE, and then living in Ireland could be good. Obviously, the weather's an issue. We have had one American couple who lived in Ireland for a while, liked it, but decided ultimately to move out to a bit more sunshine. But we also have folks who, at the higher net worths, really enjoyed the fact it's like this doesn't feel that much different, especially if you're from somewhere in a more northern climate. You don't have to live there full time. I mean, you can go back to the U.S. for part of the year and still get tax benefits. You've got the full tax treaties and all that in Ireland. So if you're an investor, if you sell certain kinds of online products, if you have certain kinds of royalty income, that could be better. Living in a tax treaty country, you get a residence permit somewhere in Southeast Asia or Dubai, what have you. You can spend your winters there, but Ireland has been a popular place. Speaking of Dubai, we've had especially younger folks looking at actually moving to the UAE, getting UAE residence. They set up a company and they can live there. And they always have the option, which I think people like a lot. So in the UAE, you set up a company, or you can also buy real estate. You get a residence permit. You don't really need to be there. But we've had some younger people say, hey, I love the over-the-top culture. There's a big community of whatever kind of business I'm trying to run. That is a challenge, no doubt. I mean, if you're in Costa Rica, we've had folks who are like in the wellness businesses, that kind of stuff. They like it there. And they have that kind of community. But if you're trying to build, a $1 billion business, there are a few of those. We've had some of those types who like it in Mexico or Costa Rica. But you might find more, aggressive people, more people who are pushing for what they want in a place like Dubai. And so getting residence there is easy enough. Again, what's cool is if you are an entrepreneur, you're not going to benefit from a tax treaty, but if you're an entrepreneur and you can structure your business offshore and you don't have to deal with things like royalty income, this is where the holistic plan comes into play. By the way, people just think, oh, I moved to Dubai, there's no tax. Well, no. If you do certain YouTube videos, if you sell books on Amazon, in some cases, if you ship physical products, I mean, you may have an issue not being in a treaty jurisdiction, or your rate may be higher, not being in a treaty jurisdiction. So this is where the holistic plans that we create and execute, where we consider, oh, you're an American, you got to do this, you got to do that, or even if you're not an American, these are the kinds of factors you need to be aware of when you're choosing a place to move. It's not as simple as this place tax-free or this place high taxes, because Ireland, they have high taxes, but you can dramatically reduce those if you're coming in as a foreigner. Whereas and that actually may be better for some folks than the UAE. But in terms of where people like to move, the UAE, that's been a popular place because they have all the creature comforts. They have all the malls. You get driven around in an Uber, and they're all Lexuses. I mean, English is decent. I think people think English is perfect there. It's not always. But you've got a very international community, and so there's plenty of expats. Not as many Americans, actually. Probably better for Brits and Australians, but we have had Americans go there and be happy. And then lastly, people perhaps taking my advice have chosen to come to Malaysia. And so Malaysia's MM2H program is now more expensive, but if you can put 6 figures in the bank, they'll give you a residence permit and you're off. There's not really a lot to do to maintain that. You do need to spend 90 days in Malaysia if you're on MM2H now. You can get the VIP program, which is more expensive, and you can live in Malaysia. There's also a new digital nomad visa. I've seen so many people who've come up to me who said, I checked out Malaysia. I wasn't sure what to expect. I had a guy earlier today. He said, oh, I live in Singapore, but I thought, hey, you know what? Why not just come next door? And he said, I'm really impressed, actually. It really punches above its weight. And so English is great. People are nice. You've got all kinds of different food options. Again, you've got your malls, if that's the thing you like about the United States. You've got bigger spaces that you don't have in many other places in Asia. One of the challenges I've seen in, let's say, Mexico, for example, was looking at real estate in Mexico City. It is so choppy in many cases to where you get, 2,000 square foot property. They get like 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. There's the spaces, there's so many, corridors and open areas and nooks that are just wasted. Whereas in Malaysia, you can really get American-sized housing for a very, very competitive price, even in some of the best areas. And so those are 8 places that Americans can live in.
8 places that Americans can go if you're thinking about moving from the USA. And I'm sure there's a lot more than just 8. We have, over 130 plus different countries, great tax advantages when it comes to your company if you want to start a new LLC or have a more international brand. Maybe you want to open up a trust and different bank accounts and explore different options with cryptocurrency that may be exempt in certain countries to where you don't have to worry about being taxed on it and you can withdraw your cryptocurrency tax free. Okay? So there's many different options out there other than the USA. Now, I love the USA. I'm from here. I was born and raised here. I will never renounce my citizenship.
You want me to renounce my throne? I will.
However, if you want to travel, if you want to explore other options,
I renounce my throne!
There's nothing to it. All you got to do is make a change. This is Nova Society. Thanks for watching.